Welcome back to Becoming the Sanctuary. If this is your first time here, my name is Kelly, founder of Thrivewell Estate and Thrivewell Hub. And this podcast is a space where we explore healing, embodiment, emotional awareness, creativity, human connection, and what it actually means to return to yourself while still living inside a very overwhelming world. I actually had a completely different episode planned for today. If you were listening last week, you remember me talking that today's episode was going to be called The Body Remembers Everything. And I still think that's an important conversation. And I think it's one that we'll have. But then this week happened. And sometimes life has a way of changing the lesson you're supposed to talk about. So today, in live time, I'm changing the title because what I've been living this week feels far more important than the episode I had planned. And if you're listening from Massachusetts or really much of the Northeast, you probably know exactly the kind of week we've had. The skies have turned yellow. The air smelled like smoke. The sun looked different. And the air quality was poor because the wildfires burning hundreds of miles away up in Canada. And I couldn't stop noticing how everyone responded. People slowed down. Everyone kept looking at the sky. Conversations changed. Even when nobody was talking about it, there was this strange, almost ominous feeling in the air. Nothing in our own communities had actually changed overnight, but the atmosphere around us had. And somehow, we all felt it. And I found that fascinating. Not because I think the smoke meant something symbolic, but simply because it reminded me how deeply our environment affects us. And sometimes before we even realize it. And while all of that was happening outside, I had another atmosphere unfolding inside. For the past several weeks, I've been interviewing for a position that I genuinely wanted. Some of you have heard me mention it here or there over the past month. There were interviews, assessments, reference checks, and eventually it came down to me and one other candidate. And today, Friday, I found out I wasn't selected. But before I go any further, I want to say how grateful I am to everyone involved. They treated me with kindness and respect throughout the entire process, and I sincerely wish them and the person they selected nothing but success. But I'd also be lying if I told you it didn't hurt, because it did. Man, oh man, it did. But here's the part most people don't know. Earlier this summer, I had announced that I accepted a completely different opportunity. And after sitting with it, I realized it wasn't aligned with the life I'm trying to build. Walking away was not easy. Financially, it would have been easier to stay. But sometimes the right decision doesn't immediately look like the comfortable decision. So when this opportunity came along, it felt different. It felt like something that could fit beautifully alongside Thrivewell instead of pulling me away from it. And I really, really hoped. And when the answer came back no, I let myself be disappointed. I'm still disappointed. But here's what's so interesting. At the exact same time I was waiting for that answer, I was also spending every spare moment working on what has become the biggest Thrivewell project I've attempted to date. And if everything stays on track, I'll finally get to tell you about it this Sunday. I've poured everything I have into this week. And that's when I realized something. Hope and disappointment can exist at the exact same time. Gratitude and grief can exist together. You can lose one opportunity while another one is quietly being built. Both can be true. And maybe that's actually what healing looks like. Not choosing optimism over reality, and not choosing hopelessness over possibility, but learning to hold both truths at once. And to me, that's the middle road. So today, I don't want to talk about having all the answers. I want to talk about what it looks like to keep going while you're still in the middle of the story. All right, so let's dive into this. Um, yeah, it's definitely a tough day to, normally I have these pre-recorded, um, tends to be recorded on like a Wednesday, uploaded and edited by Thursday, and then it's scheduled release for Friday morning. Um, but, given what I've already talked about, you can understand how it's a little tricky to push through things. And even just that sentence, pushing through something. I talk so much about how healing is a fine line. And I think especially talking about with what I'm working on behind the scenes for Thrivewell versus um, what I talk about on the outside, what was happening with the job that I was hoping to get. And man, when I tell you every sign looked like I was gonna get it, I couldn't I couldn't exaggerate that if I tried. But there was this lingering feeling. It just was this I don't know, I needed and part of me, I talk a lot about intuition. I don't know how much of it was intuition or my fear, fear from the past of things not quite working out. And I, of course, went down the rabbit hole when I first read the email. What's the point? And why did I do all this? And why didn't I just stay where I was and, take slower time to build Thrive? Well, we have a tendency to go back and replay every decision that made the news that we have at hand feel like a failure, right? Or a mistake or a misstep. And I don't know if that's true or not, right? I don't think it is. I really do believe that there's no such thing as failure. The only failure is if you give up. And for me, I I read that email and I did. I felt it. It felt as ominous as this week has been. And I'm certainly not saying that things can be that connected, that to feel what we all felt this week. And because for me, the whole sky is not turning yellow because I'm about to get bad news on a Friday, right? There's actual real reasons. And also it's not all about me. There's many other people out there in the world. But I think what I want to explain in this episode, and like I said, I'm really changing this up the day I'm recording it. So this one's going to be a bit more raw and not more honest. They're all very honest, but you're seeing me working through and living something that I'm talking about in live time. And I think that's really in the last few months, couple months of doing this podcast, this is the first time that I'm really processing it and understanding what I'm processing, you know, um, as I'm speaking. So, but that's what being authentic is. And with this first part of this podcast, I really want to talk about how the atmosphere, right? How the atmosphere can really, it really does affect us. And that's why for ourselves, because we have our own atmospheres inside of us and it can change on a dime, just like the smoke coming in and covering the Northeast could, because there was smoke seen all across Massachusetts, air quality alerts going up constantly, businesses thinking about whether they should be open or not for something that we can't, we're seeing the after effects. We're not seeing the direct effects. So it's really odd. And of course then you also have the the emotional heaviness of that cause and effect, right? Like knowing that we're getting the smoke, but Canada's getting the fires, and people are losing homes, and they're losing trees and land, and I mean, it's just ravaging through it. So we can have that emotional heaviness of, yes, everyone is noticing what's happening here, um, but we're almost getting we are getting the after effect. It's the smoke coming down and through. So we feel the atmosphere outside. It's changing our behavior. Um, and again, this all happening this week and what today you hear a lot of, um, and I say it too, is we just try to help ourselves feel better a bit, is that it can always be worse. And I always have conflicting feelings on that saying because it can always be worse, right? But how do we acknowledge what we're in? It certainly is worse that Canada is going through the actual wildfires that are tearing through their country. But it still doesn't mean that it's not bad and hard that people are getting headaches and it's hard to breathe. And um, again, just that complete ominous feeling that a yellow sky would would give you. Um, so yeah, I want to talk about here about how the atmosphere can change our behavior. It almost put everybody on edge a bit, and how quickly that can happen. How quickly everybody was talking about it. And the first day it happened, it wasn't being announced as much. And um, I just really noticed the yellow skies. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard it, I mean, when I first saw the yellow skies, it felt very tornado weather. Anybody who is in the Midwest and down into the south, that tornado alley in there, they very much know what I'm talking about. But up here in the Northeast, we don't see tornadoes very often. But I was living out in Western Mass when a couple hit a few weeks back to back, and it really is this like grayish, greenish, very ominous color that starts to appear on the sky. So when I first was seeing the yellow, that's what I thought of. But either or, wildfires or tornadoes, neither one of them are good. So it's how quickly we understood something was not right, something was wrong. This wasn't just, you know, the sun doing weird things. Or But I think we're also at a time now too where, with everything being so digital and fake videos and fake pictures from AI and some of the fake stories that are out there, it's sometimes we don't even believe our own eyes when we see something. Um, but I think we often underestimate how much we're affected by what surrounds us. We're trying to do business as usual, but I'll just speak for myself. Walking into downtown, walking through downtown Whitensville on that day that it was really yellow, it was weird. It really affected everybody that I came in contact with. And this isn't mystical. This isn't anything that is a belief system. This is just simply human. Um, but the atmosphere wasn't the only thing that was feeling heavy this week. The story I was living, the week I was living. So, as I talked about before, I know I had announced that I had a position that I was offered, and that is true. But the more that I was learning about the role and what I needed to do before I started, and you know the structure of the job itself, I realized, even though it terrified me to walk away from it, because finances are a very real thing. We can all walk towards our purpose and hope and put out good energy, but at the end of the day, the world, bills are bills and money is still important. It's a form of energy that we need to exchange for services and goods. So to walk away from it was quite difficult. It was a hard conversation to have with my partner. But he was actually quite grateful that I was walking away from that. But I wanted to have at least an interview lined up, which I did. And I will tell you, if anybody is listening and is currently in the job market and is trying to find a job, man, does my heart go out to you because it is not easy. And I feel like you can hear the exhaustion in my voice. Um, it's not hard. I mean, it's not easy. It's definitely hard. It's not that it's not hard. It's very hard. It's a lot more involved than it used to be. And I've had the jobs where I've gone to, and you need to have several different interviews, but now it's just holy moly, you take an entire month, not just waiting to hear back, but actually engaging and having interviews and long interviews and taking assessments and checking references and that's if you get an email back. But I refuse to go into the doom and gloom, so I'm just saying that we have to stay hopeful. Um, because even though for me, I was waiting weeks for this news, and like I said, I had the interviews and the assessments and then the references, and then it was down to two candidates, right? Which I didn't really know. Because, like I said, everything was pointing towards I was going to get this. But there was this little nagging voice inside of me that wasn't exactly saying you're not going to get it. It was more, what's your plan if you don't? And when I would have that thought, I would quickly bat it away because the fear it was hard. It was scary to imagine that. But now we're here, and I did find out that I wasn't selected. And the immediate disappointment that I felt, the walls came right in, collapsed right around me. And I felt anxious, to say the least. My body got very tight and tense, and then there was just this quietness, right? Like you are only going to have so much time to feel this because like I said, anybody in the job market or when your back's up against the wall and you're in a corner, time is not your friend. And so I allowed myself to cry and sit and I'm kind of still going through that if you can't tell in my voice. But I knew I couldn't rush to fix it, right? Just by genuinely looking at the time in the day. It's Friday afternoon. So I could give myself today. I had a project I was working on, so it's not like I didn't have anything. But like I said, it's nothing against the company. I just there was someone who was better fit for the job. And this is why I think that it's important um to put your best foot forward. And I knew if this moment came, and a lot of what I was hearing for myself is do not go back and overanalyze the conversations or the things that you said because I know I gave it my best foot forward. And part of it, they did go with the other candidate, but man, I got a really nice email to let me down. Probably the best the best email I've ever gotten with bad news because they really saw who I am and they understood who I am and what I'm capable of and what my talents are. And to a certain point and a certain extent, I believe that I'm overqualified for the position, and I think that might have had something to do with it as well. Um, so sometimes that can feel like, damn, never thought I'd get to that point that I'd be overqualified. But that's the beautiful thing about growth is sometimes we're looking for something not easier, that's not the right word, but we grow so much that we don't realize some of the old positions or ideas are from a version of us that is a few years ago. And It's not that I wish I wasn't as capable, but you can see and sometimes in the moment where it can feel like it's holding you back. But I have to trust, and I do trust that when those doors don't open, even though we want them to open so badly, it is protecting us from something that we're just not aware of yet, or not even protecting us always, but pushing us towards or guiding us towards the direction we are supposed to go in. But I think talking about the part that nobody really knew, I had made this announcement that I had found a job and I had a job offer, and that part was all true, and like I said, I just walking away because it wasn't aligned. Um, and making sure that I am choosing alignment over fear every time. And these moments, and I know this, like I said, this episode is a little all over the place, but I want to really show you in live time what it feels like and what it sounds like to have full acceptance, but having full acceptance without losing hope, no matter what's in front of you, because there is financial uncertainty, right? My back is up against the wall. Thrivewell is doing well, but to have a new business be able to support itself and support all my bills and have this be the only thing that I do is not realistic. And that is one of the biggest lessons I've learned as a new business owner is to make sure there's a lot more financial security. And I think sometimes I got lost in the, not lost, but I got very hopeful that this was all going to take off. And I think it will, but I wasn't allowing for the time to breathe and to build. Um, so I don't have regrets because I don't agree in those. I don't think there's any sense in, unless somebody has a DeLorean and we can go back in time, but I unfortunately do not. So all I can do is take that as a big lesson learned, and trust me, it's a big lesson learned. But I think there was a little bit of shame. I don't know if shame's the right word, but why I didn't tell you because I had so much hope and I had so much faith that I was going to get this job, this last one. So I was like, well, no sense in taking it back and then saying it again. But now I think it's time to, because my hours aren't shifting yet, and I still have Thrivewell, right? I have to consider myself grateful for that, that it's not just I'm left with nothing. I'm still building this. I haven't let up the gas on that. Um, but just understanding that sometimes saying no, right? When we think about the other job that I could have gotten, that I could have pushed through what I was feeling wasn't right. But sometimes saying no creates the space for the right yes. And sometimes that yes doesn't happen either, right? Sometimes you walk away from a decision to lean into something else, and that, it doesn't mean that the first decision was wrong. It just means these aren't the doors that I'm supposed to walk through yet. And that is that's hard to sit with today. I will say that it's hard to sit there today. But again, like I said, I'm very grateful that I do have what I have to be able to put my energy into. Because I don't know about anybody else, but me sitting around and just wallowing in this, my victim mentality is still in me. Um, I just don't engage with that part of myself. But if you want my honest answer this morning when I first read the email, it was I was in it. I went right down that dark rabbit hole, and I was questioning everything. I was questioning being hopeful and trusting my higher power and walking this path, and I questioned why to follow your purpose, and I went down the self-sacrificing avenue, and man, just all the negative took over real quick. Um, but thankfully when I did that, I was on the phone with my mom and a little bit later I texted my dad and I said, "This really sucks. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but right now my energy is putting put into not collapsing." That's all I knew I needed to do today was not collapse. I can feel it. We can feel it, right? Feel the disappointment, feel the fear. Almost immediately went back on and started applying for jobs, but I know when I feel this way, it's desperation, right? And I need to it's okay to acknowledge that you're in a bit of a dire position, but you don't want to move into desperation. Because if I was to look for a job now, I'm not looking at it for the clarity of what the alignment is. Now, that being said, I don't have all the time in the world. Um, so tomorrow, get out of bed and pick myself back up and I keep going because as hard as it may feel, giving up or moving backwards would feel worse. Right? I kind of think of that with my drinking too, when there's a hard situation and yes, I had some cravings this morning. I can promise you that. But I have really good practice of seeing it through, and understanding that as hard as it may be right now and as rough as this might be to go through and work through, all while still having to carry real life responsibilities and thrive well. Um, if I decided to go out and drink, it would make it 1,000 times worse. And it's the same thing with collapse and giving up. It's not really an option because I mean it is an option, but it's not none of these paths are going to make it easier or better for me in this moment. And so that's why while I was waiting this last week, right? Because it is very hard to navigate those feelings and not lose yourself in the collapse of it all. But while I was waiting, I've been working really hard on this big project. I've been building and refining and solving problems and working on something on the computer that really is where my brain can feel challenged. And it wasn't easy to figure out. And I was back in the world of um, something a little more operational with, some conditions and workflows and all those connecting pieces that when somebody can look at it can seem really overwhelming and very confusing and it's difficult to build, but my brain just really dives right into it and I can see the bigger picture, but also understand how to tweak and work all the individual pieces and all those threads that are coming together for the bigger vision. Um, so at least I did at least have that this last week to really lean into, and even today, my boyfriend and his son stopped by just to give me a hug, and seeing them it is very very helpful because I know I'm not alone to figure this out, but I also know what is my responsibility to figure out. But seeing them, and especially his son, who part of, I'm responsible for part of his security, and making sure that he is taken care of and supported and has what he needs. So I got quite emotional seeing them. Just it was the first time. Oh, the emotions might get me again. That I wanted to just show him strength. But I think what we can do now to help with that is to show um strength by feeling the feelings and explaining those feelings, but knowing that we're going to move forward either way and knowing we're going to be okay and that I am adaptable and capable and human beings are meant to pivot It's just, do the bigger feelings of that fear win? And that's something that is within us, and I won't, and I'm refusing to let that fear win. And I know that the excitement of what I'm building, and the excitement of what is to come, and I know these are not the only job offers that are out there. So for me, to keep going is more important. Um, so I will keep applying, and I will still have faith in what I'm doing, and I will continue to help people. And I'm really excited to announce what I'm building on Sunday, hopefully. I think my timing is pretty on track, and when you see what it is, you'll understand why it's why, not that why it's taking me so long, because I've only been working on it for a few days now, but for me, the speed that I have to build things, that's quite a bit of time. So, and the timing, it feels surreal, right? And I don't know, I might announce this and release it and everybody say, "Okay, big deal." Like, what even is this? But for me, it's something that I have, since I've started building Thrivewell, have really dreamt of creating and have it be out there. So the timing of it feels very surreal. And if you've been keeping up with my social media, you will see that there's some pretty wild astrological events happening this weekend on the 20th, which is Sunday. And it's all about having, different threads all weaving together. So I'm just gonna keep leaning into that, because one dream closing while another is growing is a wild, I don't know if paradox is the right word, but it's life, right? That's life. One door closes, another door opens. And I've been at the time where felt like I was in a room with no windows and no doors, and just all darkness. And I promise you this isn't that. So if I made my way out of that room once upon a time, I can make my way out of and forward through these feelings too. But something that I really like to talk about a lot, and some consistent themes that are coming through on these podcasts, is one is that, the fine line of healing, the fine line of life, how quickly something can go from being helpful to enabling, right? When something can go from therapeutic to escapism. There's many parts of healing and just life itself that are that fine line, and it's our job to understand what that fine line is, and try to master it. But there's many times that two things can be true, right? Like we talked about, I can be disappointed and grateful. I can feel fear and keep moving. I can grieve and still have hope. I can wish something happened without believing that my future depends on it. I can acknowledge pain without becoming pain. Life is rarely one emotion. And from what I've learned, healing isn't choosing one. Healing is learning how to carry both, and walking forward anyway. Anybody who's dealing with a big life event or a hard time, or being a business owner, or a parent, or many, many different things in life, can understand what it takes when the show must go on, right? When you are feeling anxious, or having a panic attack, or are really sad, or, those moments where our emotions are trying to get the best of us, but we have to put one foot in front of the other no matter what. And I think that that is an important lesson to really lean into. And I think back on my own life, and really from when I got sober on, I stopped wallowing in in those moments. And before that, I would play the victim a lot. And if you gave me a situation that could, heighten or exaggerate that ability to play the victim, um, man, those were some of my favorites. And now I could be the victim and if something and still not playing the victim, if that makes sense. Because for me, it's everything's a lesson and everything is something for us to learn, but it doesn't take away how much it sucks in the moment. And that's why I like to talk about the middle road so much. And we can talk about it here too. Not taking the high road, not being like everything's going to be fine and I'm okay and it's okay and well, no, I'm not okay. I feel pretty crappy to be honest. Because when you're acting like everything's okay, that's toxic positivity. And the middle road is not that. And the middle road is also not hopelessness. It's not pretending. It's not collapsing. It's feeling everything, but believing not everything and responding instead of reacting. So much about the five pillars of return are the middle road. Um, because healing for me is really finding the balance in all of these different parts, right? Because when you're returning to yourself, it really means you're not abandoning yourself. Like both of those points are true. Because right now I could abandon so many parts of myself. And that's the easy route, right? Most of the time when we go the easy way and we're going to that our old habits or our unhealed version of ourselves, that's because to keep going is so much harder. And I'm not here to tell you that it's easy. I'm not here to tell you any part of this is easy. Healing is hard. It is you consciously choosing yourself every single day for the rest of your life. And when we talk about the rest of our lives, that's why for me and recovery and being a recovering alcoholic, I have to take it a day at a time. I have a plan. I have a plan for where my life is headed and what I want to do, but I eh, it's too overwhelming when I think about the work that it's going to take every day for the rest of my life. But I've already done it for 5.5 years. I've chosen myself every single day. And that's the thing about when we keep going, right? We keep going, um, but we look back. We look back at what we've already accomplished, what we've already worked through, what we've already made it through. And I've made it through some seasons, which I'm sure all of you have too. And every time you go through something and you don't collapse and you don't abandon yourself, remember those moments and give yourself a pat on the back, but also use it as momentum and motivation to know that you can do that here too. Because keeping going isn't pretending. It's not smiling through the pain. It's not saying everything just happens for a reason. It means you cry and then you make dinner. You grieve and then you answer emails. You get disappointed and then record the podcast anyway. You don't ignore that feeling and you don't build your home inside of it either. Because I do believe, like I've said in many times, I probably did even in this podcast, everything does happen for a reason. But we have to have action, right? We have to, not that we have to, if you don't have to, but I choose to understand that everything happens for a reason, but still feel what that everything is. Because I can't see that reason yet. And I know that there's a reason ahead, but without knowing it, it's hard to understand what you're going through is worth it. It's kind of like having faith or hope itself, right? We're talking about something that there's no physical proof that it exists. So how do we know that it's going to be okay? Because we've shown in the past to ourselves when we don't abandon ourselves and we work through what we're doing, and the season of our life that we have to make it through, that our track record, if you're here and still standing, that's a track record that's showing you it is going to be okay. Because the smoke will eventually clear and disappointment eventually softens and opportunities continue appearing. and life keeps unfolding. We just don't know the whole story. And sometimes we're standing in the middle of a chapter thinking that we've reached the ending. But this week definitely reminded me that healing isn't about reaching a place where disappointment no longer hurts. It still hurts. Healing is trusting yourself enough to know that the hurt won't be the only thing you carry. And people often ask me what healing actually looks like. And this week, I'm giving you a front row seat to it. It looked like crying over a job I really, really wanted, and then opening my laptop to keep building anyway. Not because I wasn't disappointed, because, like I said, I was. And not because I ignored the feeling, because I did let myself fully feel it. And not because I suddenly knew what came next, because trust me, I don't. Healing isn't pretending the smoke isn't there. It's remembering that eventually the wind changes. Until it does, we keep showing up, we keep creating, we keep loving, we keep trusting, and most importantly, we keep becoming. Because sometimes life asks us to hold two truths at once. And maybe that's where real resilience is born. Thank you for spending another Friday with me. I don't take these conversations lightly, and I certainly don't take your time for granted. And this is now 11 weeks of showing up together, and I couldn't be more grateful that you're here. And if everything goes according to plan, I do have something really special to share with you this Sunday. And until next week, keep taking the middle road because remember, both can be true.